Very good afternoon, all of you. May I invite my fellow panelists, Laura and Karina, please, up on the stage.
Try to put our microphones forward. Hi. I'd love to do a selfie, but I think we'll wait till there's a few more people back from lunch.
Yeah.
I think.
So we are fighting the food fatigue.
So post-lunch session, we have a challenge at hand to keep you all engaged and awake. We'll be talking about digital trends, so allow me to just take a couple of minutes to introduce my fellow panelists here. In Karina and Laura, you have very, very seasoned, very senior CMOs from the region who've had experiences leading brands in different markets and having that cross-cultural nuance of having seen marketing evolve over the few decades. And we've seen that transformation. So I think we'll try and unpack a few things for you here in the next 40 minutes or so. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. So Laura actually leads her own firm after having led the marketing function for large B2B and B2C brands across not only Asia, but other parts of the world. So brings in a lot of expertise in terms of her deep understanding of different markets. Karina leads marketing for Singapore University of Technology and Design, and is fairly seasoned. While she's working with an academic institution, she also brings in decades of experience of having worked with brands like Procter & Gamble. So I'm hoping that Laura and Karina can really unpack a lot of things that are happening all around us today as we speak for the next 40 minutes or so. I wanted to start with this image, and it's deliberate, and while it might seem like an analogy for the perfect storm in terms of the change all around us, whether we're talking about marketing or we're talking about any other discipline, by a show of hands, how many of you represent organizations which are not undergoing something similar to a transformation? Raise your hands.
Everyone.
And that's the new normal, right? So this is not just any storm. So I wanted to bring in this picture of the storm called Hurricane Dorian that hit the west coast of the United States not too long ago. And what's interesting is there's a Model S of Tesla on your right. And there's an interesting story that happened during the storm in that it was announced by none other than the famous Elon Musk over Twitter, saying that the drivers of Model S or any other model of Tesla who are in the eye of the storm will now be able to run their cars for 30% more in a single charge. They were able to send out updates over the internet and take off restrictions on the battery. So it brings us to the question of how brands deliver messaging, 1. 2, what do you mean by experiences? 3, essentially what does ownership really mean of a car or anything else? Phones that you currently have, if you stop receiving updates from the brand, will those phones continue to operate the way you'd like them to? So are you really the owner, or do you just have a license to operate your gadgets at this point in time? So with that, I think brings me to the very interesting question. Just, if I may just go to Laura, unpack this for us. Like, how do we even begin talking about trends in marketing?
Well, first of all, I love the example, the Tesla example, because this is demonstrating that creating value with consumers is not just about a marketing message, is not just about a product. It's that it has to be a system. And I think that the Tesla example is a good one because that was very much about the way the automobile was was going to operate under those very difficult weather conditions, but it was also highly consistent with their brand as being a pioneer and highly innovative. It was also really internally consistent with all of the communications they were doing. And I think that this is, if there's one big message that I always like to convey to marketers is when we're looking at our digital marketing, it's so important not to look at just a discrete element, that you have to see it as part of a system. I mean, how many times have you had friends saying, I think I'm going to launch an app on my business? And somebody said it this morning. Why would you do that? What's your purpose? Well, because apps are fashionable and someone's selling me and it's a good deal. How does it fit into the complete customer experience system? And that to me has to be the starting point for digital. Digital does not exist in a vacuum by itself. We've been talking this morning, there was a great example this morning when we were talking about phones, that Huawei needs to be able to sell through bricks and mortar because they haven't yet got a platform for e-commerce. But can they do that without having a rich seam of content to engage people during the purchasing process? You have to knit them together. So that really strikes me about the example that you've given there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Karina?
Yeah, so beyond the Tesla example, I mean, Tesla has got the highest adoption in France. You know why? It's very simple. They have the most number of charging stands in all the public car parks. And that makes the adoption so much easier. And can I show of hands, how many people have ridden in a Tesla? Yeah, 1, 2, yeah. So you see, Tesla have, I call an iPad. It's a huge, dashboard iPad on the car. And it tells you everything, And one of the key things that it tells you is where to charge your phone, your car, And so I think the whole ecosystem of digital experience, product, and the larger ecosystem needs to work together. And I think that segues very much into the need for us marketers and our respective companies to work in a very omni-channel kind of way. So that is a very good example of that, yeah.
Because it can break down.
Yes,
it can break down. And
exactly.
actually, as marketers as well, we need to make sure we're not in silos in our own company. You have to look at how are we working with the other functional areas. And I don't know if you knew this. I'm from Canada, and I recently took a trip home. I flew to Canada, and normally I fly Singapore Airlines. And those of you who are lucky enough to live in Singapore and have Singapore Airlines know that it's a really wonderful, consistent, end-to-end consumer experience. Well, this time I decided to try a cheaper option that also promised to get me home quicker. Now, I'm not going to actually say the name because it was pretty embarrassing. But what happened is this was an example of an airline where that end-to-end complete customer experience broke down. And I started off thinking, I decided to fly myself business class because it was cheaper than flying premium economy on Singapore. So I thought this is a good financial deal. And it had lots of lovely promises. Got on the plane, nice, comfortable. The staff was lovely and well presented. In-flight experience was fine. I managed to get some sleep. And I paid less than I would have had I gone a conventional way. So it sounds pretty good, huh? However, I would say it was only the in-flight experience that was good. Because what happened is there was, I believe because of all the situation in Hong Kong and hurricanes and typhoons in the region, my flight was canceled coming back. That's fine. They contacted me and said, your flight's canceled coming back. We've rebooked you back to our hub city on the airline on a flight 9 hours later. Terrific. Went to bed that night and I thought, hang on, they just told me they've rebooked me to their hub city. I bought a ticket from Singapore to Toronto. They had not actually rebooked me back to where I needed to go. And when I tried to get help online, none of the phone numbers worked. They took me through to answering machines. Finally, long story short, I did get home, but it was so hard to figure out that system. And then to make matters worse, I went to check my air miles of this new program that I'd signed up for and was assured that I was plugged into. No air miles reported for any of the trip. So what started off as a really lovely customer experience wound up breaking down because the whole system was not connected. And it was an offline analog experience that was nice, but the online digital did not link, and the promises that they made and delivered on board failed offline. So will I go back and spend money with that airline? Will I suffer through that experience? Probably not. And that's what can happen. I'm sure you've all had similar examples, but that's why an individual activity, whether it's a business process or a marketing activity, has to fit into the bigger system.
That's a very good segue into talking about, like, you know, you can't talk about digital, as you rightly said, in isolation of the entirety of the experience, and you said omni-channel, therefore. Let's talk a bit more about omni-channel. I'm going to bring up the slide, which looks extremely busy and cluttered, but you know, let this stay in the background, but it's really talking about how some of these trends are manifesting in terms of convergence and divergence. And I'd like to bring in Karina to talk a little bit more about the end-to-end customer journey as you see it.
Yeah, so as you know, I'm in the university business, right? So we recruit students for university, for college education. And one of the example that I wanted to share, which we won 2 awards for during the marketing events, was that we studied the consumer behavior, which in this case was students' behavior, and what were their stress points, you know, and of course it's during the exams. And in Singapore, you have 2 exams, the preliminary and the GCE A levels, and in between you're like super stressed. And so we decided to go into the schools, every one of them, and offered them exam survivor kit, okay, to kind of survive their exams, and gave them tips how to focus, how to rest, keep hydrated, and even gave tips on where are the public spaces in Singapore that you can study, including our campus and our library. So that kind of gave the students some simple and light-hearted introduction to SUTD. And then we followed on with invitation, like, okay, you know, after this very stressful exam, time to relax, you know, you can come to our school and do all sorts of things with us. So that is kind of a journey that we kind of walk them through the many months before they even apply to the university. Yeah, so that's how we did it. And another example that we were talking about was the Pampers one, where, so it's very funny, I mean, Laura and I work in different parts of the world, but our commonality is we both work on Pampers, okay? So I was brand manager in Procter & Gamble for Pampers for many years, and she was
I was running an advertising agency in
overlapping
Thailand.
somewhere there. so you know, where giving birth to babies is concerned is like a humongously stressful period, right? So Pampers gave moms, when they were just giving birth in the hospitals, the prenatal packs, okay? And from the very analog experience to now, you know, with the digital experience, you keep in touch with that mom throughout her period of time of whether it's pregnancy, it's looking after the baby, you know, all the way up to a few years old. And, you know, with the ability to do digital now, you have chat groups, you have, you know, special interest groups that actually provide a lot of advice, especially to new moms. So experienced mom can share with new moms all their learning, and it's not just through books, but really real experiences, you know. Very personal things like breastfeeding and regaining your figure, and am I spending enough time with my kid because I'm a working mom, all kinds of insights. And so that relationship building, where appropriate, is really very important. And I would say that the use of digital and technology have enabled us to be omni-channel and widespread and be there all the time, versus you have to pick up the phone and call someone.
Sure.
I completely agree with that, and I think it's really interesting because those of us who are old enough to remember an era when there was a lot less digital, or maybe even none, know that the idea of community building has always been very important to marketers. Being able to create relevant conversations with clients has been very important. It was just harder. It involved longer cycles and more opacity. And now being able to bring them together. Another category that I think has been transformed by this ability to have the analog and the digital come together is retail. I don't know if anyone asked this morning, I don't think so. Anybody here working for a retailer or an e-commerce retailer? How many people in here have got products that are, we got one back there? How many people have got products or services that they're selling through either bricks and mortar or online stores? A few more people. Singapore is a bit of a small place to see really big retail trends, but where I think I find it most exciting, and you can go online and find a lot of these case studies, they're just fascinating, is in China. Yeah. Because you've got several factors. You've got some major tech giants and some major retailers who are focused on transformation, and you've got the ability to scale very rapidly. In China, companies are so good at scaling rapidly. If you're not opening 1,000 outlets a year, you're underperforming. And I think that the idea of omni-channel in retail is really interesting, because omni-channel means neither, it's not just about offline and online, it's a fused experience of shopping that is based on your complete customer journey. Yeah. And when I was I was running marketing for Electrolux for Asia Pacific for a number of years, and I spent a lot of time working with one big retailer called Suning, massive electronics retailers. I'm sure many of you know them. So they already had bricks and mortar stores, and when they decided to go omni-channel, and they now claim to be the biggest omni-channel player in China, they were able to bring in really interesting technologies and fuse it with their bricks and mortar store. So they took a fintech platform, linked it to your bank card. You go into a store, there's facial recognition technology that links you to your bank card. You're then moving around the store where there's RFID chips and there's gravity sensors and there's various video elements that help you navigate the store. But my goodness, can you imagine the data that they're able to get out of that complete ecosystem? It's very impressive and very exciting. So they started with bricks and mortar. And then on the other hand, you've got this idea of new retail was a phrase that Jack Ma came up with 5 or 6 years ago. And Alibaba, which of course has an amazing record of transformation and innovation in online, in e-commerce, as well as in financial tools. Yep. They said, we want to get into omni-channel retailing as well. And you may have heard of Fresh Hippo or Hema in China. They took all of their online technology and created these beautiful wet market-like stores with 30-minute guaranteed delivery to your home and all sorts of technology overhead delivering your goods. So they were able to make a great success out of omni-channel and using the data there. So those are a couple of really good success stories. And just to add one more little example, I don't know if any of you followed about 2 years ago the spate of stories that came out of fully automated stores. So they were completely unstaffed stores, and by using the various fintech platforms, you could use a phone to scan, to enter a store, to be able to shop all around the store, buy your goods, and never talk to a human being in the whole process, because there weren't any there. And when that came out, there were videos on the internet showing all of these stores if you couldn't get there to see it. There was a huge hype. But what was very interesting, and this was the Nikkei newspaper people did an analysis of these unstaffed stores, these automated stores. Now, many of them are either shut or bankrupt. And the pace of stores, for instance, Amazon in the States, it's slowed way down. And I thought, what happened there? Because it felt like they had something really exciting. The big insight was they were technology-led, they jumped into this market, and then they didn't really learn from the successful retailers. So what they didn't pay attention to was that if you're going to have a convenience store, you need to be selling quite a lot of high margin, fresh foods, lunchbox snacks, things like that, stuff that spoils fast, but you get 40, 50% margin on. Instead, they were selling longer life things, like UHT boxes of juice and snacks and things like that have a low margin. And after the initial novelty wore off, people said, this is basically a vending machine. You're not selling me anything fresh. So the technology was too expensive to pay back, and they failed to learn from real retailers. So really interesting that omnichannel is not a guaranteed success. It can go both ways.
Yeah, so that segues actually into the fact that digital or technology is not the antidote for all cancer, you know what I mean? So you really need to have the basic marketing insights, consumer journey, and what actually clicks with the consumer lifestyle that you are targeting for. Yeah. So it's really important because, you know, that technology overload, right? And in the end, we're all humans. We do things that meet our needs, right? So if consumers or marketers or companies are not meeting their needs, then it's just another fad out there, and we have seen fads come and go
And you
everywhere.
lose trust, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And trust is another thing because, you know, the digital promotions can be abused, and we have seen many examples of that. Yeah. So we were just sharing that, you know, we are all coffee fans, right? And Starbucks is a brand that have a lot of user-generated content, but also a lot of fake user-generated content. It was hilarious. And so, you know, the promotions they normally do, it's with like the music people and so on. And one example is that, you know, Starbucks launched the pink drink, and the user cleverly associated that with a song by Taylor Swift, and they made actually an EDM, a very nice one, looks on brand, you know, corporate ID all correct, and they spam it across, you know, the internet. And if you are a Starbucks fan, you say, hey, you know, I can get a free pink drink by showing this at the counter. And the poor, you know, cashier at the counter had to tell the customer, sorry, this is a fake, you know, but it's so well done. And so that's another challenge that we as marketers have, that whilst you want to encourage user-generated content, how do you, you know, prevent all this and police all this and still have your brand out there as one that's trustworthy, it's credible, etc., etc. So actually, in Asia, I would say the Koreans, the Chinese participate a lot in their brands. And if, you know, the people from Korea have any insights to show or to share with us, I think it will enrich the conversation a lot. Any of you?
Any examples from the room in the context? So we're talking about trust, we're talking about authenticity, we're talking about end-to-end experiences, we're talking about not getting intimidated with what's going on with technology. And if you are trying to replicate offline experiences digitally, then you better do it right. So we're talking about a lot of things here.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to unpack some of this, and great examples, I think. And let's talk a bit about, we spoke about this already. So I want to bring us to, again, something that's really important and sits at the center of all of this. We were talking about data, we were talking about the importance of providing, curating compelling digital experiences, and not just digital experiences, end-to-end experiences. And so how do you keep this front and center when there has been so much, you know, off late concerns about privacy, how data is being used or being abused by brands, and how do you bring trust, therefore, back into the equation with the customers? So
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think in terms of privacy, it's not only, I think it takes both to tangle, both the consumer as well as the brand, yeah. And the brand better not fail the consumer in that sense. So if you take the example of Alibaba, right? If you have been buying stuff on Alibaba, and you pay with Alipay, and you have a fixed address that you are delivering your goods to, Alibaba or the e-commerce companies have a lot of data on you, okay? And if you are a smart marketer, in Alibaba you can buy a house, to the furnishings, to the gadgets, to all the decorations, to even the nuts and bolts, right? So if you're a smart marketer who is setting up this kind of stuff, you can actually follow the journey and anticipate the needs of the buyer and start recommending, hey, I noticed you bought a house or insurance for a house, and maybe you also want the fire insurance, or you want a contractor to
I think
recommend stuff and all that.
This is a great example, though, because within Alibaba, you've got, notwithstanding the fact that it's in China and maybe sometimes the rules are a little different there than outside, but it's one big brand. Because I think that, to your point on privacy, I think one of the biggest trends that all of us involved in digital media, digital marketing right now are onto is data privacy. Yep. And what is happening now with first-party and third-party data, and what many people are calling the death of the cookie. Because those of us that are looking at highly automated marketing campaigns online, you've got to be able to to follow the consumer from site to site. And because of all the problems that have existed with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, look at what's happened with those of you how many people here watch Netflix sometimes? You probably saw that episode on the Fire Festival, that huge party that was just a complete disaster, but how those influencers got caught up in peddling something that wasn't real. There's been such a corruption of trust that now we're seeing with GDPR and other forms of data protection moving away from third-party data. And that's fine if you're an Alibaba because you have so much data. It's fine if you're one of the walled gardens of Google or Facebook, where you have a colossal amount of data that you can say, it's been generated on our site with permission by consumers, so we're allowed to use it and we can market that. The problem is, for smaller brands who are saying, I don't have the ability to generate that kind of data, how can I protect and how can I have first-party data? So bigger companies, we were talking about P&G earlier, P&G trying to develop its own first-party data. Coca-Cola, in some markets, they've got a lot of automated vending machines that are electronic that you interact with your phone. They have got first-party data that they're collecting. You've got organizations here in Singapore. NTUC Income is a big insurance company. They have 20 different profiles of consumers that they gather data through profiles. The collection of first-party data is now so important to brands, and for those who are too small to collect it, there's a cry for how do we operate away from the walled gardens? How can we safely have first-party data, or at least the ability to know about who our consumers are as they travel through the internet? And there's no hard answers for it yet. It's difficult, and we're going to have to get there as an industry. But the death of the cookie means that the way we do digital marketing is about to face some very choppy waters, I'd say.
Yeah. So maybe I can share one of the ways that we try to overcome that with kind of mimicking first-party data is actually geo-targeting. Yeah. How many people do geo-targeting here? Yeah. So on location. So if you, like I said, there's no shortcut for understanding your consumer, right? So if you understand the lifestyle of your consumer, you can actually target them through certain locations, whether it's shopping mall, it's schools, it's community center, or wherever that they kind of congregate. So for us in university, we were geo-targeting them around the schools, yeah. But regardless of whatever, you just need to understand your consumer well and find them, and then collect data from there. And whether it is the very old school way of collecting names in events or using the phone or whatever.
Sure.
So I think it really helps to collect that
Thank you.
data.
Well, moving on, in the interest of time, I just want to sort of touch upon, this proliferation of mobile and how that's sort of shaped marketing and, the surge of video. Any thoughts around that, if you want to talk about some examples?
Yeah, my very key, first thing first, okay, how many of your websites are mobile friendly or mobile first? Yeah, I think that is now a cardinal rule with regards to being mobile. Yeah, I think more people consume information on the mobile than on their laptops, than on paper, etc., etc. So that is a very key thing that you have to do.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that having a mobile-first attitude toward not only your site, but also looking at how you go to market is so important. Last year in China on the Singles Day, $30 billion worth of sales in 24 hours conducted online. Globally, they're looking at mobile is going to represent something like 75% of all e-commerce in the next couple of years. If you're targeting young people, if you're targeting what's it called, Gen Z, 16, 24, it is a non-negotiable that you focus on mobile. But I think that just talking to some of the folks in the room today, not only do we have online sales, but for instance, I think that mobile has been absolutely critical as a social transformation. For instance, in reaching people who have been unbanked, who haven't had bank accounts. And so you've got companies like Grab, who provide ride services, ride hailing, and food delivery, and durian delivery, and all sorts of things. They are actually providing to 9 million riders and drivers micro loans to pay for their bikes and phones. They're providing micro insurance that they're paying ride by ride and so forth. And then companies like Revolut that are now coming to Asia. They started off in the UK providing currency exchange. And then I know our friends over here from GT Bank from Nigeria, where they are looking at basically a full stack digital bank in addition to a bricks and mortar legacy bank, putting that together. And as a result, you've said that you're reaching customers who were not able to use a conventional bank before, and it's unlocking a ton of social potential. So where mobile is having an impact goes beyond the e-commerce and the fact that so much is happening over video. It's inconceivable that a brand wouldn't start to think about how do I use mobile.
Yeah, so the other change in mobile is really the ability to pay via your phone, right? I mean, if you're old enough, you remember the American Express, don't leave home without it. Now you can leave home without your wallet, but you cannot leave home without your phone, you know what I mean? I've started doing that. I leave my wallet at home and I just bring the phone because you can pay for virtually everything on the phone now.
Now with the Apple Watch.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a really, I find that it's an improvement for my life, but is actually another opportunity to collect first level data, and there's so many opportunities for partnership, between the banks, the telco, the phone companies, etc., etc. Yeah, so that's really interesting.
So I'm going to scoot along in the interest of time. A couple of things that I did want you both to also weigh in on. When you're looking to hire sort of, talent digital marketing, what kind of skills are you looking for, and what is it that, digital marketing community should be looking to sort of do in terms of skill building?
Well, I would say that first and foremost, if you're going to be in marketing, you still have to believe deeply in brand truth and creativity and consumer insight. Those don't change with digital. But what is clear is that the role of technology in your job is much higher than it used to be. There's always been, for instance, with math and statistics and so forth, that there's always been a place for that in marketing, whether it's buying media or doing direct marketing. It's now just a whole lot more important. I think as well, the skills that used to be very good for a marketer stayed the same for many years. Now what we're seeing is the rate of change. So I think if I had to write a letter to my younger self, it would be get ready to be continuous learning. Learning does not stop when you finish school, when you finish university, saying, I've learned that. You have to have a learner's mindset and say, okay, in the old days I needed to be able to talk about paper size or kerning. I now need to be able to code. At least the basics of a website, I need to know my way around, go and study and learn. And I think that's got to be the biggest piece of advice, is keep your mind open and don't say, I now know everything at 29 years old that I need to know for the rest of my career, because it's not true.
So to add on to that, I think the other key skill where a marketer is concerned, and it's also a lifestyle thing, it's that we kind of take technology for granted and say, okay, I throw my campaign into the internet world and hope for the best. But really, I think good marketing still requires that attention to detail in terms of really understanding where it goes, how it goes, measuring all of that, and the delivery of the total experience cannot be compromised. So on top of what Laura has said, there is really no compromise with regards to attention to detail. Yeah.
Wonderful. All right, so closing, a couple of more things I would want us to reflect on. One is that this idea of building capability in-house versus looking at agencies. Where do you place your bets?
Look, I think that we're seeing with a lot of the bigger brands a desire to bring talent in-house. For those of you who feel like doing a bit of research online, the CMO of Procter & Gamble, Mark Pritchett, a few months ago was calling for a sea change in the way things were being done, and he talked about the importance of people putting their hands on the keyboard, of embracing data and having much more in-house. I think that the biggest challenge for brands who want to bring it in-house is talent. And it's being able to find the right people, train the right people, and to have the foresight to know where to go in the future. Agencies, I think, continue to play a really important role in the ecosystem, and what we'll see is more in-housing, perhaps of the key fast action where you've got business critical choices that need to be made around data day by day, in-housing of teams so the data is there, but then other agencies perhaps remaining where they are and continuing to interact long distance.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think we're going to see more hybrid models as clients say, I need to understand my first party data, I need to make fast decisions on swapping over campaigns, et cetera, so I need to have it in-house.
Yeah, so we just went through an exercise like that because we were in the midst of changing between agency or in-house.
We're just at the top of our sort of window, and so while you finish that, and just the last 30 seconds, I want us to also reflect on how do we declutter this.
Technology.
Yeah, so that's the last minute from these two CMOs.
Yeah, so my last point is that whether you want to in-house or you do a hybrid model really depends on your business, how fast you need to make decisions with the availability of the data, or how much branding do you need, if it's a very branding heavy business, then you really need a good agency who have that level of creativity and a diversity of clients to bring fresh thought and fresh innovation and creativity. So thank you, everybody.
I'll take this one. Don't get blinded by the science. We're sold on so many potential platforms. There's still massive consolidation that has to happen in this industry.
Yep.
I would say it goes back to the old rule of thumb that any good marketer thinks about when they're doing their planning, which is a 70-20-10 rule. 70% of what you're doing should be tried and true and certain to deliver your results. 20% might be around boosting or going after a subset that is a bit of a niche, and 10% is your wild card, is something that you try, fail fast, or succeed quickly. But 70-20-10, don't get blinded by science, and but keep exploring.
Thank you, and with that, please join me in thanking Karina and Laura for their excellent conversations here. Thank you.
Thanks. Would you indulge us in a group selfie. We'd love to have a picture of all of you guys.
Do you want them giving you a standing ovation like they did for me earlier on? or-
Would you mind knocking out these front lights for just a second? Can you do that, or will that shut down the show?
Yeah, we shut down the show, I think.
Okay, well, we'll try.
Okay, we'll try without it.
Go one angle.
All right, smile on that side of the room, and then you're out of the light. Wave your hands. Thank you very much.